This administration is just so darn sick of it. They're so darn sick of hearing of the media bias. There was this wild exchange, like crazy wild. And I feel bad that we didn't get it on the air yesterday because it was sort of happening in real time. But I promised I would bring it here today because I couldn't believe what we saw. Effectively, the CNN reporter, Caitlin Collins, keeps going to Trump. And fine, okay, you're doing your job. You need to understand why it is that you can deport criminals. And so she keeps pushing this. And like they go around the room and basically everyone tries to explain the law to her, but it doesn't really go that well. So this is just a huge dressing down. I got to play it for you. I got to play it. And it's amazing.
The man who your administration says was mistakenly deported. The man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador?
Well, let me ask Pam, would you answer that question?
Sure, President. First and foremost, he was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country. And in 2019, two courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country. Right now, it was additional paperwork had needed to be done. That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us. The Supreme Court ruled, President, that if, as El Salvador wants to return him, this is international matters, foreign affairs, if they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane.
So will you return him?
And you are doing a great job.
Thank you.
Did you hear that? He's like, and you are doing a great job. Thank you, Pam. And then the reporter comes back. It's hard to hear. I realize that because the microphones aren't necessarily attached to them. So we just have these boom mics inside there. But keep listening.
Also respond to that question because, it's asked by CNN and they always ask it with a slant. Because they're totally slanted because they don't know what's happening. That's why nobody's watching them. But would you answer that question also, please?
Yes, gladly. So, as Pam mentioned, there's an illegal alien from El Salvador. So, with respect to you, he's a citizen of El Salvador. So, it's very arrogant even for American media to suggest that we would even tell El Salvador how to handle their own citizens as a starting point. As two immigration courts found that he was a member of MS-13. When President Trump declared MS-13 to be a foreign terrorist organization, that meant that he was no longer eligible under federal law, which I'm sure you know, you're very familiar with the INA, that he was no longer eligible for any form of immigration relief in the United States. So he had a deportation order that was valid, which meant that under our law, he's not even allowed to be present in the United States and had to be returned because of the foreign terrorist designation. This issue was then by a district court judge, completely inverted, and a district court judge tried to tell the administration that they had to kidnap a citizen of El Salvador and fly him back here. That issue was raised to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful, and its main components were reversed 9-0 unanimously, stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the President could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador, who again is a member of MS-13, which, as I'm sure you understand, rapes little girls, murders women, murders children, is engaged in the most barbaric activities in the world, and I can promise you if he was your neighbor, you would move right away.
So you don't plan
But
to
the
ask for
Supreme
any
Court's
help to get him
asking
back?
to.
And what was the ruling in the Supreme Court, Steve? Was it 9-0?
Yes, it was a 9-0
In our favor.
in our favor against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual, at El Salvador's sole discretion, was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time.
Well,
No version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it, per the court, can only be directed to him.
I asked
¿Usted lo
President
liberaría,
Bukele, what is
Presidente
can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, both of you suggested that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right?
It's always
How can I smuggle? How can I return him to the United States? Like, I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, I mean, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
But you can release him inside El Salvador.
Yeah, but I'm not releasing I mean, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. I mean, we just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? And that's not going to happen.
Well, they'd love to have a criminal, released into
I mean, there's a fascination.
They would love it.
Yeah.
They're sick. These are sick people. Marco, do you have something to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, Stephen Island, I don't understand what the confusion is. This individual is a citizen of El Salvador. He was illegally in the United States and was returned to his country. That's where you deport people, back to their country of origin. Except for Venezuela, that wasn't refusing to take people back of places like that. I can tell you this, Mr. President. No, the foreign policy of the United States is conducted by the President of the United States, not by a court. And no court in the United States has a right to conduct the foreign policy of the United States. It's that simple. End of story.
End of story. Right? Except for the media. The media is really on the side. Okay, well, we've got to protect this guy. This guy, Garcia, who was one of the 260 suspected gang members that were deported. He had actually, back in April of 2019, the court ruled that he was actually a member of the notorious gang MS-13. So that was the first ruling. And Bondi has pointed to both of these immigration court decisions as evidence that he was tied to MS-13. That first ruling, April 24th, 2019, denied him bond in part because, quote, the evidence shows that he is a verified member of MS-13. And then in December, a Board of Immigration Appeals, that ruling upheld the denial of the bond because he's a member of MS-13, although they didn't get into judgment over whether he was in fact a member of that gang. Later in October, an immigration judge barred the feds from removing Mr. Garcia while his asylum application, in which he argued he could face persecution from groups like Barrio 18 gang, was under consideration. So let me get this straight, right? Like, we've got somebody who the U.S. government says is part of one gang, and then he goes and he's being held for that because he's, they're not going to give him bond because he's an MS-13 gang member. They got him on something, right? And then they wouldn't give him bond. But then he comes back and he said, no, I have to apply for asylum because I'm a member of this gang and the other gang is going to take me down. I mean, what's going on? Like, we're now becoming like a refuge for gang members? I don't think so. So fast forward here. Garcia gets deported along with other MS-13 gang members back to his native El Salvador. Okay, so he's back home now and he's being put in a prison. And then Rubio's saying, but it's not my problem anymore, right? Like, what's the issue? It's now going back to El Salvador. And the El Salvador president is saying, no, we're not going to release him. We're not going to send him back to the U.S. And it's believed, per my sources, they may have some stuff on him in El Salvador. So it's kind of wild and convoluted, but it seems pretty instinctive here. You're here illegally, you get in trouble, they find out you're part of MS-13. The next thing you know, you're applying for asylum because in Biden's weird world, gang members were like applying for asylum because the other gang might take them out. Yeah, whatever, okay? We don't want any gang members. We want good people coming here. This is what then led to kind of this brouhaha on Fox with Stephen Miller trying to put this very, very clearly out, that the whole story had been manipulated. The Supreme Court, for goodness sakes, the Supreme Court said, yes, the president has this authority under the 1798 Aliens Enemy Act. So why is this such an issue? Because the media is making it an issue.
Number one, DOJ said a federal court cannot compel the executive branch to engage in any mandated act of diplomacy or incursion upon the sovereignty of another nation. So your argument is that you don't have to bring him back home, but will you?
So I want to correct, I hate to do it, Bill, but I got to correct you on every single thing that you said because it was all wrong. First, we won the Supreme Court case, clearly, 9-0. A district court judge said unconscionably that the president and his administration have to go into El Salvador and extradite one of their citizens, an El Salvadorian citizen, so that would be kidnapping, that we have to kidnap an El Salvadorian citizen against the will of his government and fly him back to America, which would be an unimaginable act and an invasion of El Salvador's sovereignty. So he appealed to the Supreme Court, and it said clearly, no district court can compel the president to exercise his Article II foreign powers. in any way whatsoever. DOJ called me after that Supreme Court ruling, and they said, it's amazing. We won this case 9-0. We are in excellent standing here. So this has been portrayed wrong for 72 hours in the media. They said the most a court could ever compel you to do would be to facilitate return, which would basically mean if El Salvador voluntarily sends him back, we wouldn't block him at the airport. We would put him back into ICE detention, and then he would be deported either back to El Salvador or somewhere else. The Supreme Court said that is the most the government can be expected to do. So we won the case handily. The misreporting on this has been atrocious.
Okay,
Secondly,
I appreciate
he was
the
not, no, Bill, it's
clarification
important. He was not mistakenly sent to El Salvador.
Okay, so do you still
He's
believe
an illegal
he is a
alien
member of
from
MS?
El Salvador. Hold on, this is important. In 2019, he was ordered deported. He has a final removal order from the United States. These are things that no one disputes. Where is he from? El Salvador. Where is he a resident and citizen of? El Salvador. Is he here illegally? Yes. Does he have a deportation order? Yes. A DOJ lawyer who has since been relieved of duty, a saboteur, a Democrat, put into a filing incorrectly that this was a mistaken removal. It was not. This was the right person sent to the right place. Now, some have said, well, but he had a thing called a withholding order. So a withholding order means you've been ordered deported, but an immigration judge is saying you cannot go back to a particular country. Here's the thing. If you are a member of a foreign terrorist organization, you cannot have a withholding order. Since he's in MS-13, there is no withholding order. Furthermore, the gang that he is accused of being persecuted by doesn't exist anymore in El Salvador. The 18th Street gang is gone. So you have an illegal alien from El Salvador. Bill, where are we supposed to send the illegal alien from El Salvador?
You haven't even
to
allowed
what
me
country?
to ask you a question. Are you convinced he is still a member of MS-13? That was your original charge.
Yes. But here's the thing, Bill. Yes, but here, not only am I convinced of it, not only is El Salvador convinced of it, Bill, he's an illegal alien from El Salvador with the deportation order. So his only options in life, Bill, his only options in life are to be deported to El Salvador or to be deported to some other country. That's it. He has a deportation order. So, Bill, you tell me, what country should we deport him to? Tell me, please. Tell me.
So Marco Rubio on Sunday morning said this. On Saturday night, another 10 criminals.
Bill's like, moving on. I'm going to make a point on this in just a second because everybody's getting so worked up that we're sending people that are here that are involved in criminal activity and are here illegally to begin with. Everybody's like worked up that we're sending them home to their home country where their home country can make a decision because they say, oh, their home country has such a bad prison system. So wait, like you're supposed to come to our prison system as a criminal because we're going to treat you better? Come on. Like, come on. Here's Ana Navarro.
Why does it hit me so hard? So I have known about this prison for a long time because I read and I follow Latin American news. Mm-hmm. And this place is as bad a prison as can possibly exist. And the idea that we are sending, that the United States of America is sending innocent people just so that Donald Trump can make this point about how he is deporting criminals and animals and monsters, as he calls them, to this prison, when it is a lie. It is a lie. And I told you before.
Ana Navarro, she knows all about the prison system, right? Because she's done all that NPR reading, for goodness sake. So I was looking at some numbers. There are estimates that there are some 200,000 people in the prison system. I went and checked that in El Salvador. It's actually perhaps by way of ChatGPT, more like 110,000. So I had heard 200,000, but we knew that about 300 people had died in incarceration since, this would have been over a 2-year time period, since the prisons were up and running. And, when you look at it, 300 people, you don't want anybody to die, right? But 110,000 in the system, that's actually a pretty small percentage. Like, I want to say like 0.15% or so over 2 years. It's probably 0.27% of the 110,000. But, if you're just going year by year, then it may actually, I don't know if it was, because I only have the numbers, the 300 for for the multiple years that the prison has been in business. But if I compare and contrast it, say, to U.S. prison systems, where we had somewhere in 2020 around 6,182 people dying, then you're actually looking at a much higher rate of death among people who have been incarcerated here in the U.S. than you may be in El Salvador. One source that I spoke to who invests heavily in Latin America was actually explaining that the El Salvadorian prisons, while they get this really, really bad rap, they're trying to make a business out of it. It's actually, as far as prisons go, this person's point was it may not even be as bad as some of the U.S. ones. So I think it's really important to understand that and know that everything that they're saying is colored by their utter distaste, dislike, and hatred for one Donald Trump. I don't think this is about Trump trying to say, oh, wow, I deported 260 people. I think it's mainly that he's trying to make sure nobody comes here. And if you do come here, guess what? You're really rolling the dice. How else do you think he's getting these things down? I mean, we're down like 98% in border crossings, because I think a criminal who wants to come here and engage in crime is going to realize there's a good shot that he might just be deported to one of those El Salvadorian prisons. But, the Democrats are on the wrong side of this one again. You get the senator from Maryland who's all worked up about the Garcia guy saying, I got to go save him. He's like ready to bust into the El Salvadorian prison. Kid you not. He said so today. Now just remember, this guy, when the Maryland woman died at the hands of an illegal migrant, horrible situation, he didn't have anything to say back then. He was just mad because, the Republicans wouldn't approve all the money that Biden wanted for the border. Keep in mind, they're cutting down on border crossings to the tune of down 98% with no extra money. No extra money at all. Anyway, here is Van Hollen, the senator, saying he's going to go duke it out in the El Salvadorian prison.
I saw the comments of President Bukele, and I look forward to meeting with him. I've requested to meet with him. I reached out to the ambassador here to ask to meet while he's here. But I've also made clear if we can't meet here, I do intend to go to El Salvador to discuss the release of this individual who is illegally detained, a Maryland man who's the father of 3 in a notorious prison in El Salvador. And I believe the president of El Salvador will recognize why it's important to allow him to return to the United States of America, because it is absolutely unjust and illegal to have this Marylander detained one more day in a notorious prison in El Salvador. Of course, President Trump could have just said, bring him home. Of course he could have done that. But this is an administration that has lied about Mr. Abrego Garcia, right? The vice president of the United States tweeted out that he had a criminal record. That was a lie. They're just lying. They've gotten caught lying. They don't want to admit it. And they have an obligation to bring him home. But I will say the president of El Salvador should not now take it upon himself to say that he is detaining him for one more day, because that is kidnapping. I understand that the Attorney General said that we would provide a plane to bring him home. So all the president of El Salvador has to do now is hand over and release an innocent man and let him come home to his family.
He's a Marylander, despite the fact that he's here illegally. And according to the courts, they're thinking that this stuff is made up. No. The court actually said that they couldn't allow him to be released out on bond because he was a member of MS-13. I just don't really know what to say. I think that they've kind of lost the story at this point, right? They're so far gone. Oh, we got to save the innocent guy. The member of MS-13 per our courts. Okay? That wasn't Pam Bondi making that up. This is why they weren't going to release him to begin with. So we sent him home. And you're accusing the El Salvadorian president of kidnapping. I mean, this is just getting a little weird, okay? Like, I know you guys don't know what end is up politically, but let Pam help you understand it.
To prison in El Salvador.
Now, the president was musing about sending some of the most horrible people in this country down to that mega prison. People that push ladies into subways and hit old ladies with baseball bats to the head. Is that legal to do? Is that something you're allowed to do?
Well, Jesse, these are Americans who he is saying who have committed the most heinous crimes in our country. And crime is going to decrease dramatically because he has given us a directive to make America safe again. These people need to be locked up as long as they can, as long as the law allows. We're not going to let them go anywhere. And if we have to build more prisons in our country, we will do it.
Right. That's what I thought. And now I think...
Yeah, just don't tell the media that, right? The media is going absolutely wild. They cannot accept this. I want to point out, we do have some breaking news that's just coming in. It looks as though the judge has made it clear that actually, again, there is authorization. Well, I mean, the Supreme Court said this, right, guys? I mean, the Supreme Court in the United States of America has said that the president has the authority to do this because of the Alien Act. But this is new. Another one, Judge. It seems that we'll see if this news is. Judge drops case against man Bondi called MS-13 leader, allows time to challenge deportation. Okay, so that's really interesting. It's getting super political, guys. You now have this just coming in. The judge is dropping the case against this man, Garcia, that Bondi is saying was an MS-13 member because, don't forget, that's what the court had decided. I'll go back to this. First of all, like he had been caught trying to come into the country, and I guess this is what this initially was about. In an order handed down on April 10th, the High Court directed the administration to facilitate Abrego Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador. Oh, this is the latest, right? To ensure that the case is handled as it would have been. They don't like that is somehow somebody who was in the U.S. illegally now getting deported and being in the hands of El Salvador. And I guess I just get back to what both Marco Rubio was saying as well as Stephen Miller, that you have somebody who is believed to be an enemy of the state because he was believed to have been in MS-13. So how are you like saying that? How are you trying to say like that we don't have the authority? I'm really perplexed by it. Really perplexed by it. And I think that this is actually what's really going to hurt the Democrats.